Purushottam, I have one question. Like
Yeah.
when we process the files, is there a way that we can move? Let's say I have the file in source folder,
Okay.
and I have another folder called processed.
Yes.
Is there a way we can move that file from source to processed?
Yes, that will do that. So usually what we do is apart from this so as I was saying, right, so in this whole mechanism we'll also use the data bricks mechanism. So usually, like in one of my application where we were processing the data, and once the data is processed, then we move that into processed zone or archived zone. So yeah, that all data movement, file movement, we can achieve that. That we will see. That scenario also we'll see. So I created a scenario. So we will discuss once we are done with the data flow side and all. Okay. So I took good big scenario which I used in my one of the assignment. Okay. Then we will see that. Now see here. So have a same storage account which we were creating in earlier session. So we have two files, sample and test CSV. Okay. Now in the target, I want to load the data into the target. All right. Now I'll create a pipeline. Load. Okay. Now created that. So what is the activity that we do whenever we want to create the data, whenever we want to copy the data? There is a copy data, right? Copy data is the one which we use to copy the data. Now, apart from that, first I need to see what are the data is available in the source, right? In the source. So whenever I want to get some data or metadata of any source, whether it's storage or SQL, what do we use? What do we use? Get metadata we use, right? Now we'll take this get metadata. Okay. Now we'll create a data set. We'll create a data set for this particular storage account over here. All right. Now here data set. What I will do, I'll create a new one. Blob storage. CSV files. So here we have data set. Open. Okay. So we created that. So here we'll get the we'll go over the child items over here. So for that, what we need to do is we'll remove this.
In case of like if I want to check whether the files exist or not, today's do I need to add another metadata task?
Yes. No, you can create you can add multiple properties over here. You can add multiple properties over here. You don't need to do that. Okay, so you can add any number of fields over here. So it all depends on your requirement. So I add child items. Then I have
Then
added.
can you also add whether the file exists or not? Check.
Yeah, we can do that also.
Okay, so
Yeah,
multiple options.
you can add multiple options over here. Also, I wanted to tell you one thing. Yeah, size, last modified, item name, item type, these are all depends on your requirement. You can add any number of properties which you can pass to next activity. All right, now see here. So in the LRAY data set, so what I have done is, in LRAY data source there is a sample. Sorry, in LRAY data source, whatever the data source I was creating, right? So I will take that data set, okay, ds.source, which refers to this particular location. One second. Okay, I'm here. ds source. Okay. Now ds source is the one. So if you remember that I used this to locate the files in the source container, right? I use the same data set, okay, source container. So this refers to source container. So when I do that, so if you see here in the field list, you can see something called child items. Do you see that? Child items. So based on the data set properties, these fields will be visible for you. All right, say suppose if you are giving some file name explicitly, you're selecting the file name in the data set, then this child item will not be visible for you. All right, now but here my goal is to capture the child items, child item in the sense based on the source type. Here the storage account is my source type. So whatever the files are available in the in that particular location, I can capture everything over here. Now child items is the one which I want to capture here. All right, now see here. So if you understand the logic, it's very simple. So the only thing is that you just need to practice, and you don't need to like kind of it's not mandatory to make it success every time. The only thing is that you need to understand how do we use that, and whatever we are discussing over here, okay, in this detailed one, metadata and all, this will not be asked in the exam. This is purely for your practice purpose, interview purpose, or your real-time scenarios. All right. See here, get metadata is there, copy data is there. If I do that, okay, now here is giving the list of files here. The copy data copies the data, whatever is available. But when I do that, can I copy multiple files over here? Can I copy multiple files? Because this is giving multiple files. This is copying, this can copy only one file at a time, right?
Yes.
Yes, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So to achieve my goal, what I need to do now? What I can do to perform any activity repeatedly?
Something loop.
Loop we need to do, right? So now I'll do the for each now. So this is, there is something called for each, which I will be using that. So I will delete this. So I'll control X, edit, and paste it over here. Okay. So now I can process the file loading repeatedly with the help of this for each. Okay. Now the important thing is I need to pass these child items, whichever are available over here, to this for each. So yesterday I was telling that how to pass the output activity of, sorry, output of one activity to another activity, right? So now for each is here. Now I'll go here, settings. Now see here, what are the property I should be parameterized? I should give some parameters, right? I should give some parameter. What is for each will do? It will give some parameter, some condition, and based on the parameters, it will process, it will compute the logic within the for each loop, right? Here also, what is the parameter set that you want to pass to this for each? That you need to mention over here. Now here, what I'll do, add dynamic content. So as I was saying, this is one of the powerful property in any of the activity in ADF, right? So with this, you can make any property dynamic, right? Now I'll go over here, right? So what is the get metadata? So let's give some meaningful name, get files list. All right. Now I'll go over here, add dynamic content. So what is the out, from where I need to capture the output? Get files list, right? So click on this. Whenever you click on this, then it will say activity of get files list output, right? But in that output in the sense it is generic, so many are there, right? Now there, if you remember that, I try to capture the child items over there, right? Now I will give the same name over here, child items. Got it? So earlier, if you remember yesterday, I used the property called exist. Now today I'm using the property called child items. So based on your requirement, based on the design, whatever the property you wanted to capture, you just capture it and use it over here. That's it. All right. Are you with me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I click on this. Okay. Now I captured that. Now this for each is getting the all the files list from this get metadata activity, right? Now if you see here, there is one more property, important property called sequential. Okay, so as the name itself specifies, when I say sequential, the files will be loaded one by one. Okay, say suppose there are 10 files are there, okay, and you want to load those files sequentially, then you can click on that. If you don't do that, if you are not using this option, all the files will be loaded in parallel. Okay, so usually you'll use the parallel, right? So here I'm parallel, and whenever you want to load the data in parallel, so you can see here the something called batch count, how many parallel runs you want to do. So how many parallel options you want to do, whether you want to load the 5 files or 10 files in parallel, that you can choose over here. Okay, so I'm leaving it here so that it will take the appropriate batch count over here. Okay, default batch count, right? So here,
So Purushottam,
yeah,
if we choose sequential, so are they picking up as per alphabetically file name?
yes. So it no, it will take the file names one by one. So it all depends, not alphabetically. So whatever the file list it will passes, that will do. So it's not mandatory to use a specific condition, or we cannot control the specific condition unless we hack this what do you say, this passing values. Okay.
Okay, that means randomly it is picking up one by one.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Now see here, I'll go over here for each. Now the copy data. Now I'll say source over here. So DS source I will use. So if you remember that, yesterday we tried to make this as a dynamic with the help of a parameters. So there is something called dataset parameter. That is a file name I used. Okay. Now whenever I use any parameter, that will be displayed over in the dataset file name. Okay, wherever I want to use, I can use this here. Okay, I created a parameter, I use the parameter over here, and once you do that, so what happens, whatever number of parameters that you use, that will be displayed over here, right? Now what I will do here, the file name I want to capture, I want to take the file name. okay, which is being passed from the to the for each loop. Okay, now what I will do here, I'll say add dynamic content. So if you remember that there is something called for each iterator. So whatever the value, whatever the record set that is passing to for each, it's kind of a very the expression, whatever the file content that is being accepted by the for each, okay, that I can use over here. Now click on that for each. See here, item in the sense, say suppose you say like in the general programming language, I less than 10, I equal to I plus 1, or print I, you do that, right? Now here item is I, right? So an individual value from the list of values which is provided to the for each, right? Now item dot name, okay, name in the sense the whatever the items which are available, okay, what is the item list which I passed the files, right? All the files content I pass, because child item gives passes the file names. Now here I want to copy that file names over here, okay, I want to mention the file name over here. So that is the reason I said item dot name. So this name in the sense the file name. So do that, okay. Now the sync is the target, ds target, all right. So mapping, okay, we did not check this in earlier. So mapping in the sense, so usually in SSIS we have like mapping, right? Source and target. So whenever you have something called source and target mapping, you can mention over here, okay. But here I have everything is dynamic, so I'm not using that. Otherwise you can check the mapping over here. So source, say suppose source I'm mentioning a file name, sync I'm mentioning a file name, then it will give the all the mappings over here. Now settings, the parallelism, so how the data should be moved, the parallelism that it will give, and data integration unit, already I spoke about this. So usually data integration unit is the computational unit in the data factory. Fault tolerance, this also I used. So whether you want to skip the files, how do you manage the failed files or incompatible files, how do you want to manage that, you can give them the fault tolerance. Now I use the source which has a name, sync is a generic one which I wanted to use, right? Now let me validate this. Yes, validation is done. Now let me publish. Right, now let me debug this. What happened, is failing. I did the same, right? So it's saying that you should have the property, but it has that. Why it's not taking that? Let me see that. So open over here. Yes, I did that. interesting. Just before the session, I did a sample on this. Can navigate provide data source. Make sure provide data source is directory that can do navigation. It's directory only. Full file name, child items. These are the one which I have created just before our session. DS source sample init Azure blob storage. PCD sample. Okay, the same thing I used over here. Let me check that. Otherwise, it's as simple as it is. So maybe I'm missing some property. So this is working fine actually. For DS source, sample is a file name, child items exists. So here the output is giving copy data child items. What is the error is giving? Child items. Let me see that. Okay, the spelling is gone over here. Interesting.
So, Purushottam,
Yeah.
here after child items, is there any opening or closing brackets, something like that?
No. We don't have any such kind of thing.
Or it's a child atom or child items? S is there.
I did not use S.
You already use just
No, it should be used child items.
items. Okay.
I just did before our session. Not sure. Let me see. It's very interesting.
So if these
Okay, let me do one thing. Okay. So let me create a data source, new one.
So
Okay.
Purushottam, if
Yeah.
we receive such type of error,
Mhm.
so do we have a solution in Internet Explorer if we search something like that?
Yes, of course. Everything will have a solution. Yes, we do have that.
Mhm. Okay.
Let me see that now. It should give now. Is good. Okay, just taking. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I made a mistake by using the same data set. Okay, because the data set, because get metadata expects a directory, the source content, right? What do you say, a container name or directory name, not exactly file name. So I made a mistake by using the same data set. Okay, so that's what I made a mistake. So even though I created that, I forgot to select the appropriate one. So that is the reason it was giving error. All right, because the error is, as I said, it should not have any file name, right? Because when I say file name, it throws an error because it tries to see a directory only. It tries to identify a directory over here, because it for that particular component, the source should be a container or a directory. So I was by mistake, I was using the same thing, so that is the reason it was giving the issue. Okay, my bad. I just did as a sample, and I did not recognize that. So here the child items were there, which are passing from here to here, right? Now here, whatever the child items, so whatever the capturing, I'm getting the values, so I'm capturing over here, and then I'm passing the value is something called a property called name. I'm using the file name item dot name, which is being passed from the for each loop. All right. Now, if you see here, get metadata. So here we have the child items, and if you see the output, child items, what is the output? Sample.csv, test.csv. This is the output which I'm getting from this. Now for each will pass the item count. What is the item count? 2 files are there. So these 2 items. Now here, one by one, whatever the files are there, that will be being loaded over here. Okay, so this is one of the important property, and sometimes this get metadata is there, right? So sometimes this may not be a get metadata. Sometimes this can be a configuration file, or sometimes this can be a lookup property. We'll see about the lookup property once we are done with the Azure SQL. So sometimes with the lookup property, I will pass the values. Okay, I will pass the number of tables or the file names which I wanted to capture. Okay, then that can be passed over here. Then one by one, I will take over that. All right, so it all depends the get metadata activity or lookup activity which I am passing over here. All right, any doubts in this?
Yeah, Purushottam.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, please tell me.
Yeah. In our SSIS, we have different types of enumerators for different purposes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here, what type of enumerator we are choosing? It is not like we do not have any such type of things, or we have to select it from somewhere.
Enumerators in the sense the type of
For each, for files, we are going for each enumerator, right?
yeah.
If we want to get list of items from a table and we want to look through each row, then we are going for a ADO enumerator, right?
Yeah. So
Necessarily.
here we don't have. Yeah, I got what you're trying to ask. So here we don't have anything called like specifically this one specific to a source. So it's like for each is a generic one. You can tweak that and you can use for any purpose. Okay, so as I was saying, so this get metadata I use. Okay, sometimes what I can use, so we'll see that tomorrow. I'll show you. So here the lookup will be there. Okay, now in the lookup I use the Azure SQL. Okay, say suppose I'll use it. Okay, I don't have anything SQL one. So here what I will do, I'll say select select table name from information.schema, something like that. Okay, so then what happens, all the table list will be passed over here. Then all the tables will be processed. Whatever the processing I want to achieve, I can achieve that here. Getting? So if we don't have something called ADO enumerator and all specific to source, here everything is generic, which you can use. Okay, got it?
Yeah. Okay. Can you show me the precedence constraints once? I have seen something like.
Yes. Yeah. I'll be doing that. Say suppose this one you're saying, right?
Yes.
This one, right?
So skipped is there, right? Yesterday you said that we cannot disable or something like that. What is this skipped here?
Skipped, I'm not sure. I haven't used that. Maybe I need to see that. So skipped, we
Okay.
hardly use that, but usually we use success and failure. Yeah, we don't have disable property. Yes, I'm sure about that. Yeah, even I large
Okay. What I
day.
am thinking is if we go with this skipped precedence constraints, I think it will not go to next activity.
You can check here if you want.
Let's see that.
No, first you have to remove that green one, that success one.
Yeah, both are there here.
Uh,
1 second. Yep.
hmm.
Let me see when this is added. Still it is doing. Yeah.
Now you can run. Now you can run.
Yeah, you can skip that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good option. Thank you. I never used that. I never encountered this actually. But I need to use always skip. So I'm just trying to compare with SSAS what is missing over here. Apart from disabling. So can I achieve the same disabling functionality over here with just skipped?
Yes,
Yeah.
because see, when you using skip, the for each loop is not executed in
Yeah, this is fine.
debug.
In this case, this is fine. But we need to see that. Let me see that. Yeah. So success, failure, completion are almost same. Like SSIS, say if success is this one, then failure, then I'll do some. Usually, I'll do some logging purpose. Okay. Say suppose I'll create a procedure for logging. If it is success, then I'll use. I'll execute the procedure to update the status of the pipeline or failure of the pipeline based on the success or failure. I do that. Okay. That is about the precedence constraint. Yeah, that's about for each loop, and this is being widely used in your assignments, and as well as it's one of the important interview question as well. How do you make that file loading dynamic? Any doubts so far?
No.
Are we good?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. This is about the this one. So in the zones, if you remember the zones, I was talking about the zones. So we'll work on the detail in next session once we cover the SQL. So raw zone, landing zone, processor zone. So all those things we can manage with the help of a dynamic configuration table. Okay, or dynamic configuration table or a configuration file. So there are many things in ADF to discuss apart from the zones. Also, we'll see what are the different types of connection properties or connection methods to storage accounts or SQL, and how do we use that storage, how do we store the credentials secretly in the key vault. Okay, so those things we will discuss in the further sessions. Now let's talk about the Azure SQL one. So Azure SQL is one of the important topic related to exam point of view, even from the implementation point of view. So relational DB. So yeah, I don't need to discuss this because every one of you from database background. So we have 4 properties, relational DB, like atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. You know that, right? ACID properties. So atomicity, transaction, atomic unit, and all the transaction within a transaction will be successfully execute or none of them will execute is atomicity. Consistency, all should be remain consistent after every transaction. And isolation, so they should not be affected by one each other. So when 2 transactions are happening in this one, and they should not be interfere one with each other. And durability, of course, so whenever any particular transactions happens, it should be permanent, right? So let's jump into this Azure SQL. What are the various things provided by the Azure SQL? Okay, so Azure SQL is a general term, but it has various things within the Azure SQL. So Azure SQL is a term used to refer to the family of SQL database services hosted on Azure, underpinned by Microsoft SQL Server database engine. So usually, so which is a family. So in the sense, whenever I say Azure SQL, it has various options under the Azure SQL. So it's a virtual machine, managed instance, SQL database. So different sets are there which we need to use. Give me a minute, one second. Somebody is knocking the door. Yeah. So they have we have various options within the Azure SQL. So all these properties together makes Azure SQL. Okay, so based on the based on the requirement, based on the flexibility, based on the different customer requirement, we use different options. Okay, so here Azure SQL, some of the important properties like same like your cloud. So it's fully managed by the Azure, and predictable performance and pricing. So we can based on the units or based on the settings that we choose, so we can predict the performance and pricing. Okay, and elastic pool for unpredictable workloads. So we have something called elastic pool. So in the sense, like based on the data volume or based on the processing volume, the computational power or storage capacity can be improved or increased. And 99.99% is availability, that is about the SLA. So it is it almost supplies it almost makes like a zero downtime. And apart from that, you have geo replication, so which I was discussing during cloud concepts. So we have geo replication, there won't be any data loss. And supports existing SQL features. So all the SQL features, whatever you have generic SQL features, that it supports. And scalability with no time. So I was saying, so whenever a storage needs to be increased, or whenever a computation power should be increased, so that can be scalable with no downtime. And secure and compliant to data. So all the data will be secured, and all the complaints will be applied, right? So if we see here, we have these are the some of the different things which we'll discuss. So in the Azure SQL, we have 3 components like Azure SQL virtual machine, SQL managed instance. Are you able to see PowerPoint, right? Are you able to see PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So let's see over here and try to see this. So we have Azure SQL over here. Whenever you have Azure SQL, create Azure SQL, see here. So we have three different services which we can choose: SQL database, managed instance, and virtual machine. So SQL database, which usually we use that. Best for modern cloud applications, hyperscale and serverless options are available. So here, whenever we want to use the SQL, give me a minute, some issues. Yeah, sorry. So we have Azure SQL. Here we have single database, so through which you can create a single database, or elastic pool. We'll discuss about what is elastic pool, and either we can use a database server. You know that, right? Server. So we can create a server or database or elastic pool, and managed instance. So whenever we want to lift and shift the on-premise database to the cloud, then we'll use the SQL managed instance. Okay, so SQL managed instance is one more option which we use for lift and shift method. And we have SQL virtual machine. So here virtual machine, you can use a virtual machine. Okay, and based on the your database or your database version, and you can use your application on that virtual machine. Okay, there are three types of things are there, and based on your requirement you will choose that. All right, and let me go back to the PowerPoint. So here I was, and here I was saying that, yeah, and based on the services, we have three types, different services we have. So we, based on the services, like Azure SQL machine, SQL managed instance, SQL database, if you see this table, okay, so we have on-premise, okay, so hardware is not supported, operating system is not supported, SQL server is not supported, but we have SQL server on Azure. If it's saying IaaS, okay, so we have hardware will be provided, OS and SQL server, which we will need to do that. It's something like we have virtual machine. Okay, I was showing the virtual machine option, right? This virtual machine, so this virtual machine option comes under infrastructure as a service, because it just provides a virtual machine, and on top of it you will manage the OS and SQL server and managed instance. So managed instance, as I was saying, it provides this OS and hardware, and SQL server we will use, we will manage our SQL server. And when it comes to Azure SQL DB, everything will be provided by the Azure itself, right? And here in extension to the above table, if you see, whenever you're saying virtual machine, this is the IaaS, so resource model will be virtual machine, right? And before, for migration requiring OS level access and control. And whenever see Azure managed instance, only it's an instance model. So whenever we lift and shift some of the on-premise databases, we'll use the managed instance. So we'll try to see each and every option, like how do we lift and shift methods and Azure SQL. Okay, and of course the final Azure SQL, which is the PaaS services best for modern cloud applications. So whenever you want to manage your applications in the database, you'll go for the Azure SQL, right? Now let us see here in the Azure database, in the PaaS services, what are the different options which are important, which we need to understand. So we, as I was saying, we have single database and pool, right? So single database is creates a database and SQL database, its own set of resources and managed by a server. So when you select a single database, whatever the resources are available, that will be confined or limited to only that particular databases, right? And whenever you say pool, so pool in the sense the name itself specifies, it provides a pool of resources and that will be allocated to all the databases within the pool based on its based on its performance or based on its requirement, right? Say suppose you have a pool, and in pool I created a pool, say suppose for example like 100 GB I created, okay, 100 GB I created. So what are the databases which are available within that pool we are creating, all the databases can use those 100 GB based on its requirement. That is a pool. We'll see when to use pool, when we use single database. And managed instance, as I was saying, so this is for lift and shift method. So whenever we want to lift or migrate a on-premise databases to Azure, we'll use the managed instance. All right. And apart from that Azure SQL methods like single database, pool, and managed instance, one more important thing that you need to understand, what are the different service tiers available within the Azure SQL. So let's go to this Azure portal and check that. So here I have single database. Let me create a single database over here. Let's create. So you know that a server is mandatory, right? Right? Yeah. So here elastic pool, if you want to use elastic pool or only single database. So here I'll go for the single database. See here in the computation power, we have something called vCore and all. So let me show you that what it is. Yeah. So we have different computation power which we'll be using while creating this one. So one is vCore model and DTU model. So we'll see what is DTU model, what is vCore model over here. Okay, so what is DTU? DTU stands for database transaction unit and is combined measure of compute, storage, and IO resources. That in the sense, so say suppose DTU usually will have all the computation power combined. When I say 2 units, so 2 units will have a set of computation power, that means CPU, and the storage, that means the MB or terabytes, whatever we are using, the GB, whatever using, and resources also. Okay, so DTO will have all this as a combined one. Okay, and within the DTU we have something called basic model, standard model, premium model. Okay, and whereas when you choose a vCore, it will have only control over compute and storage. Okay, compute and storage. And usually what we do, we pay whatever we want to use. Okay, so with the vCore model, what you can do, you can independently manage the storage capacity or computation capacity. But whereas in the DTU model, this will be mixed, or this will be combined as a single entity. You cannot configure storage or computation power independently. All right, but whereas vCore, you can manage the computation and as well as the storage independently. That is the main difference between the DTU and vCore. So this is important respective to your exam point of view, also your interview point of view. So just you need to understand how the DTU works and vCore works. Any doubts? Are you able to hear me? 1 second.
Yes, Purushottam.
Yeah. And again in the vCore, like in the DTU, we have like basic, standard, premium. In the vCore also we have general purpose, business critical, hyperscale, based on the type of model we use. So general purpose, it's used for general purpose model. It's backed by Azure Premium Storage. It will have higher latency than the business critical. So based on the premium model, based on the vCore model, whatever we use and whatever we pay, it gives the more flexibility. So it has some latency, and here in the business critical, it use local SSD, so that it will be the performance better. Where are hyperscale database? So whenever we want to scale the data before beyond 4 TB, beyond 4 terabyte databytes, then we use the hyperscale model. So usually we'll go for the business critical, but if there is large data, we use the hyperscale model. So there is a good algorithm which I found over the net a few months back. I will share with you. So how do we choose the different model, different vCore model or DTU units based on the requirement? We can select that. Okay, so I'll share with you that. And here, as I was saying, the vCore model, DTU model, which are very important. So here for single database, elastic pool and managed instance will use, and whereas DTU model can be used for only for single database and elastic pool. So managed instance is not available in the DTU model. So whenever you choose managed instance, you may not be able to see the DTU base. And best for customer who needs flexibility, control and transparency. Why it makes this flexibility, control and transparency available? Because the vCore allows us to independently manage the storage and as well as the computation power, right? So that is the reason it allows it supports better flexibility, control and transparency, because we can see what is the amount of storage we are providing, what is the amount of computation we are providing, that we can see over here. But here the DTU, as I said, it has a single unit, so we may not have that flexibility. But if we want to manage everything as a single resource, okay, without bothering about the managing this computation power and as well as storage, we go for the DTU based model. Okay, and straightforward way to translate on-premise workload to cloud. So whenever we have like storage, like on-premise workload, we have straightforward, we can make into the cloud, because we know how much storage it has and how much capacity we might need to use. So the same configuration we'll use that, and we'll straightforward we'll do that. But whereas the DTU, because it works as a DTU, so what we need to because it works as a single unit, we need to make some calculation saying that okay, for 1 GB we need to use this many units, then for 100 GB how many we need to use. Okay, so based on that we need to calculate, and we need to determine the DTU. Okay, and of course the Microsoft recommends vCore database model, because the thing is that we have individual configuration model, so Microsoft always recommends a vCore model. And if the DTU based purchasing model reads your performance and business requirement, then you should continue. So I was saying, so if there is a constraint within the budget, because it vCore vCore takes more budget compared to DTU. But if the data model is, if the purchasing model is DTU, and if it is, if you feel that that is good enough for your application, and you are not seeing any performance issues and all, then definitely you can go for the DTU model. So in one of my previous application, so the database is small, and we have limited budget. So even though we have budget, but the database is small, and we could mean, and we have like front end and back end model. So it's a web application, and for that we use DTU based only. So we did not go for the vCore based, because DTU was good enough for us to create whatever the application we wanted to manage. So we could we could use that with the DTU model. So that yeah, so apart from that we have some two models, so provision and serverless. So the name itself specifies that Azure SQL provides Azure resources that run your database with a fixed amount of compute resources for fixed hourly price. So provision in the sense, hourly based, we use the price. The pricing will be used based on the hourly. And serverless, the database is provisioned as serverless component with auto scaling compute and billing for user per second. Okay, so in the provisioned, say suppose if you are sure that you are going to use like 10, say suppose you are going to use 10 GB storage capacity. Whenever you are sure that like a limited amount of storage capacity that you are using, then you'll go for the provision model. Give me a minute. Yeah. So, but say suppose whenever you're not sure about how much storage you are going to use, how much computation power you are going to use, then you'll go for the serverless power, serverless. Okay, so when you're sure about how much database you are going to use, you'll go for the provision, but it will be priced hourly basis. But whenever the serverless, in the sense when you are not sure about how much storage capacity you are going to use, then you'll go for the serverless. The only difference will be in the provision, it will be hourly price, hourly billing, and the serverless, it will be second billing. Okay, this is also one of the important topic with respect to exam or interview purpose. Okay, so you need to understand what is provision and what is serverless, and also you need to understand what is DTU model, what is the vCore model, and what are the different types of vCore models we have, what are the different types of vCore model, DTU models we have, that you need to understand. Also you need to understand, or you need to understand when to use which model. Okay, in which cases you'll go for the which model. It all depends upon the your requirement or customer needs, and based on that you need to choose the appropriate option. Okay, so I have a nice algorithm, flow chart, sorry. So I will share with you over WhatsApp, you can check that. Okay, so tomorrow we'll see, we'll try to create a pool, we'll try to create a single database. Also we'll try to create a managed instance and try to lift and shift one of the managed instance. And also we have different kind of services which are provided by the Azure SQL to compare the differences between the on-premise and Azure. Whenever you are shifting from on-premise to Azure, that also we'll see various methods to find out the differences. Any doubts so far?
No, Purushottam.